Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury.
And welcome to our latest playful interpretation of Portsmouth's finest political podcast. I guess we could have changed all our colours to purple and light blue this week to fit in with the zeitgeist, but it seems to have caused much consternation when you turn the little red and white St George's flag on the England kit purple and light blue. So we've decided to stick with the colours we usually use and take a glance into the final full council meeting before all the hurly-burly and fun and games of the May the 2nd elections kick off. How goes it, Simon?
Yeah, I was trying to get my head to work around making a joke about someone being cross and it not being a red. But which is the best flag? I guess it would be, Switzerland, because the flag's a big plus. So that my career in stand-up comedy is take off. So jokes aside about colourful flags or mixed coloured vexillology.
That's good work.
Tuesday's full council. So, as you say, the last full council before the elections on May the 2nd, the last full council that was chaired by Lord Mayor Tom Coles, and there was a very heartfelt appreciation for the work that he and the Lady Mayoress Nikki Coles have been doing in their time in their respective roles, and really made it their own and made a massive impact. So that was lovely to see. At the end of the meeting, but a 7-hour meeting odd.
It did have that look about it. There was a social media post from Portsmouth Labour as their councillors were going in, and I did check on their health and well-being that they had plenty of fluids and snacks available, as it looked like it was one that was going to run and run. And I guess it's our chance to review whether the agenda was packed with the pithy issues that matter to the people of Portsmouth, or whether we once again have fallen into the, shall we say, the last knockings of the opportunity for leaflet fodder. So we'll cast our ruler over the list and offer our kind of witty and insightful insights as to whether we feel that there was merit in the motions, or whether it was simply a little bit stage managed.
The information, if anybody wants to go look at the full information, then they can, obviously, on the council's website. I'll post the link into the comments. But yeah, we're going to try and condense a 7-hour meeting into just under an hour, maybe, if we're lucky. So we had 10 notices of motion actually on Tuesday, and I realise I've got the wrong graphic up there. So we had 10 items up on Tuesday. There were 5 deputations from members of the public. One was speaking about 13A, which was about the Fairtrade City. From Christine Millen, talking about how that originally came about, and how it's good to re-energise that and continue that certification. As a council had already renewed its commitment 10 years ago. Speaking on 13B, the City of Sanctuary, the Council of Sanctuary, Malcolm Little had spoken about that, and about how 140 or so towns and cities and boroughs, and culmination of a non-political, non-religious organisation supporting about 2,000 refugees and signposting them to help, but also supporting vulnerable women with no recourse to public funds. So speaking about his views on that one, and also on 13B was Shamila Dana talking about the refugees that have settled in Portsmouth, and speaking as a migrant that's lived in the UK for 21 years, how she'd experienced homelessness and had been exploited in domestic servitude, and referred to Red Cross. So all sorts of really personal interactions then from members of the public. I think I'll come back to some of a couple of those I mentioned in the morning class as we kind of get to those motions. There's some really heartfelt things. One thing we don't normally see is recorded questions from the public, questions in writing. Those were a couple of issues. The first one from Edward was asking, apparently in 2021, Councillor Gerald Jackson, then the legal counsel, admitted that if Southern Water basically didn't sort that maybe the local councils in the area could bandy together and consider buying Southern Water. And this question was basically saying, well, did anything come of that, or was it just kind of words? And the response from Gerald Vernon Jackson, currently serving as cabinet member for traffic and transportation in City, so feeling the pinch really of the frequent closures of Eastern Road, I guess.
Well, yeah, and again, it's another farcical intervention over this weekend that was supposed to be finished on Saturday night. I think the latest is Monday evening. So I would suggest you leave early for work tomorrow, Simon, unless you're working from home.
I'm not working from home tomorrow, so I'll leave as early as me getting up allows.
Marvellous.
And will make my way to Havant by the bus. I don't think I'll walk to work because it takes about an hour and 20 minutes to walk it. Basically, the answer in short was no. There was only an answer from one other council that was interested in the idea, and that was Brighton. So no one else was interested in ganging up and doing that. And there was another written question, which was from Mr. Head, which was asking about what plans are there, basically to supplement the schools in Stampshire, considering the large increase in housing that it's about to experience with the Tipner East development, and whatever might happen in the future with Tipner West, if that ever actually gets anywhere. Or sorry, Lennox Point, as it's called this week. So to which Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education, Susie Horton, responded to say that actually those schools actually have spare capacity at the moment, but as the development proceeds into other phases, that might be something to keep under constant review, but that's something they always keep under review anyway. So although those schools might feel they're full, they're actually under their registered capacity. There's bandied about an acronym I've never heard before, a PAN, which I think is pupil allocation number. So I'm assuming that's the number of pupils that they can serve. So so some interesting questions then, and points from the public. Shall we start moving on to some of the motions quickly?
Yeah, there were 10 to get through, so we might have to skip over a couple. But let's have a look at the first meaty one.
So with the first meaty one, do you want? So which one did you mean? Sorry, I was.
No, you go for your life. You're running this show. I'm simply here to applaud and cheer at the appropriate points.
You be the talent. So the first motion was the Fairtrade City motion, which, as I said, had a deputation regarding that. This one from Councillor Hugh Mason and Susie Horton, and essentially saying, look, the council wants to reaffirm its commitment to using Fairtrade products at council events as widely as possible in civic offices and other public buildings it operates. You'll be surprised to learn that was carried without really much kind of intervention. It was, I think, one of the shortest motions. In a sense, I think it was only about 8 minutes long, but that was carried. That was everyone saw the sense in that. The next one, the Council of Sanctuary, brought forward again by Councillor Horton and Chris Atwell. So talking about Portsmouth since 2019 has been recognised as a city of sanctuary, and calling on the local authorities across the political spectrum to have been awarded Council of Sanctuary status by taking some following steps. So some really kind of logical things, continuing to work with Portsmouth City of Sanctuary and other partners to support those in our city. to join the local authority network and be able to commit to joining in with work towards Council of Sanctuary Award and agreeing to sign up as a supporting organisation, produce an action plan which focuses on learning and embedding the principles of being such a city of sanctuary and good news, and when ready, apply for formal recognition. So again, hopefully not a contentious thing.
Yeah, these first two are falling into my bucket of leaflet fodder. It doesn't feel like there's anything of any great substance in there. Yeah, it kind of good thing, tick, move on.
Yeah, well, that also was carried with without any drama, and that one being basically a 10-minute debate, but again being one of not much disagreement at all. The next one, 13C, was about the need to improve dentist provision in the city. So this was brought by the Labour group, so Councillor George Fielding and Councillor Oscar Shah, expressing their concern basically about the lack of dentistry provision in Portsmouth, it reaching crisis levels. Students are struggling to secure basic dental appointments, and it being a matter of public health concern that demands urgent action and intervention, and is calling for the council to express its strong dissatisfaction with the current state of dentistry, request the Cabinet Member for Community and Wellbeing and Health to call on the national and regional health authorities to address the shortage, and to collaborate with other local health and dental professionals, community representatives and NHS authorities to explore interim solutions, asking the leader, along with all council group leaders, to write jointly to the Secretary of State for Health and Care to outline the issue. So, and advocate a long-term solution to ensure all residents of Portsmouth have equitable access to affordable quality dental care through the NHS. So I sense from your response that you're sensing leaflets coming. Are you
This is one that really does grind my gears. It's like everybody was claimed victory for the whole dental provision. Penny Mordaunt had sorted something in the north, and Stephen Morgan had sorted something in the south, and the Lib Dems had sorted something for the whole city, and there was a lot of mutual backslapping and claiming victory. And obviously, you know, I get so bored of motions that call upon somebody to do a thing that no one's ever going to listen to. It's just a waste of bloody time and energy. And I just, you know, we call it shush. So those first three, they're all in the bin for me. Pointless nonsense.
right?
I've not enjoyed them, if I'm honest.
Okay. Well, hold on to your hats, folks. I do like it when you sit on the fence, Ian. It makes the show so much easier.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, Simon. And this is where, for me, you know, the function of the council. Who's going to say, oh, do you know what? Fairtrade products, I don't think we should be splashing out our money on those these days. We need to go back to battery farmed eggs and see whether we can exploit some child workers somewhere in the world to save a bit of money. Never going to happen, is it? The same way that nobody's ever going to say, well, I think we've got plenty of dentists. There's more than enough dentists to go round. What you're worrying about? They're just silly posturing. And it's yeah. I'm moving on. I'm letting it go.
I'll let you deal with your annoyance and deep cynicism. It's almost like you think there's an election coming or something.
Possibly.
So 13D is Pride in the Streets of Pompey. So this brought by the Labour group Charlotte Gerarda and George Fielding. So this is talking about issues with residents constantly raising concerns about street cleanliness, fly tipping, graffiti, things left outside property, smashed glass on pavement, that sort of thing, and this causing obstruction and problems for. I think one of your pets is really enjoying their food or something in the background there.
Yeah, sorry, that is Millsy, who is again, he does this during every one of our shows recently, but for some reason the microphone is doing a fantastic job of picking that up.
Your microphone is doing a fantastic job of picking up your guide dog eating his dinner. So,
Yeah.
in particular, that's a concern for disabled residents, those with mobility issues, or those with pushchairs, and older people finding it difficult to walk down roads safely. And generally
All very true, and a source of constant challenge. Again, seeing as Millsy's made his introductions to the podcast whilst eating his dinner, it is a source of constant frustration. I mean, it is a position that on a Friday locally, if I want to get from here to the gym, stealth boast. Obviously, if it's a rubbish and recycling day, there is no chance of making it there without having to make 3 or 4 diversions into the road and the oncoming traffic to get to the end of the road. So I think this is one of these ones where, yes, the obstructions, the fly tipping, all of these things are valid, but I'm not sure that this one is, this is another motion that I'm not wishing to pre-guess the outcome, Simon, but I don't think anybody objected to it, did they?
So, I mean, it called for the Transport, Environment and Community Safety Scrutiny Panel to review hotspots of antisocial behaviour and street cleanliness, and provide a recommendation to Cabinet about how things might be improved, to ask Cabinet to look at alternative measures to ensure residents remove their bins from the street, and to ask Cabinet Member for Environmental Services to engage with COLAS, that's our streets contractor, to see if more proactive measures can be taken to improve street cleanliness, and to ask the same Cabinet Member to conduct a review of graffiti hotspots across the city and target them. So this was the first one that actually had. Sorry, I beg your pardon. There was the previous one with the dentistry had a subsumed amendment from Matthew Winnington and Lewis Gosling. So Lib Dem and Conservatives submitting an amendment on that one, which just tidied up some of the language. The amendment here from Dave Ashmore and Mark Jeffrey from the Lib Dems was also subsumed. Yes, spoilers. This one was carried. It wasn't really kind of a point of contention. I think everyone can agree that the streets need cleaning. But there was a bit of a kind of backwards and forwards about when some areas seem to be better than others. And in I think in Nelson, Councillor Lee Hunt was talking about they're using mobile CCTV cameras to help them catch fly tippers and to deal with things like that. So perhaps in the other wards that they're mentioning, they're speaking of in this motion, that they should consider that sort of thing in there. But we all want to live in a cleaner city.
Yeah.
And there's the thing. There was a bit of a conversation about, well, if wheelie bins aren't going to work in flat-fronted terrace properties that don't have side access, then they can still bring out bags or have kind of the box arrangement, so they don't have to have something wheeled through the house.
It's always going to be a dilemma in a city that wasn't designed for the modern age. It's evolved, and again, it is that element where, whilst we don't enjoy weaving in and out of the bins, it is much less of a challenge than it used to be back in the days of the piled black bags, which once the foxes would get to them, my previous guide dog saw the pavement buffet on the way out of our house as something he wanted to very much get involved in. So yeah, everyone agrees, all good stuff. What do we got next?
So next, so 13E, we've got International Women's Day tackling gender inequality in Portsmouth. Motion brought by Councillor Yinka Adeniran and Councillor Charlotte Gerarda. So we've got some clips here, and there was also an amendment from Mary Vallely and Kirsty Meller, which I'll speak to in a second as to how that went down. But shall I play that clip?
That sounds fabulous.
before you today to address an issue. No, sorry, let me just give you the subheading. International Women's Day, Tackling Gender Inequality in Portsmouth. Firstly, I want to thank Steph and Sue for that, your wonderful speech on the deputation. Well done. Yes, I stand before you today to address an issue that is not just timely, but deeply embedded in the fabric of our society, tackling gender inequality in Portsmouth. As we commemorate International Women's Day on March 8th, it is imperative that we reflect on the challenges faced by women in our community and take concrete steps towards achieving true gender equality. It is no secret that women have borne the brunt of austerity measures and the ongoing cost of living crisis. The gender pay, unequal caring responsibilities, and intersecting factors of class, disability, ethnicity, and sexuality have all contributed to the disproportionate impact felt by women. Despite being in the majority in our city, women are still paid less than men and are underrepresented in senior roles. This is a stark reminder that there is still much work to be done to level the playing field. As we mark 100 years since women first won the right to vote, it is disheartening to see the lack of progress in women's representation in local government.
In order to fulfil our commitment to gender equality, we must ensure that Portsmouth City Council does everything within its power to sustain funding for these essential services. Domestic abuse has a profound and long-lasting effect on a woman's health. The psychological trauma and emotional scars left by domestic abuse can persist long after the physical wounds have healed. It's imperative that we recognise the interconnectedness of domestic abuse and women's health and take proactive measures to address these issues. According to Women's Aid, services supporting women in domestically abusive situations are facing significant challenges due to funding shortages. This not only jeopardises the safety and well-being of countless women, but also undermines our collective efforts towards achieving gender equality. Furthermore, research from the House of Lords Library highlights alarming disparities in maternal mortality rates within the Black community. This underscores the intersectionality of gender and race, illustrating how marginalised groups face disproportionate challenges when it comes to accessing healthcare and support services. As councillors, it's only right that we ensure that all women, regardless of their background or circumstances, have access to support and resources they need to thrive.
I know that as political parties, we all want to encourage women to come forward to stand for us, but I think we can all acknowledge that it is not through lack of trying, but that there are a number of factors that were mentioned in the deputations earlier, such as caring, family, cost of living, income, all of that stuff. So I'm really pleased that we now have Women Councillors group for the 10 of us who've come together where the party politics goes out the window and where we have started to discuss these issues that face us and just generally the trials and tribulations of what we face as female councillors. So I hope you all do support this motion, and thank you very much.
I've been involved in domestic abuse for 25 to 30 years. We've both experienced it. I've worked in the sector for 5 years. Let me tell you, things are not that much better. I really can't tell you that things have improved so much that we don't need to worry about it. We do. We need to commission it. We need to have money in this council for women recovering from domestic abuse, surviving it. I'm passionate about this because I see families all the time going through it and children being affected by it on a daily basis. We need a women's health hub in Portsmouth. We need to find a way to fund that.
Just to echo Councillor Vallely, I think a women's health hub in Portsmouth would be absolutely transformational. for lots of the reasons that were described in the deputations. And I also thank Steph and Sue for coming along and giving those. I really support the creation of a Women's Health Hub in Portsmouth, and I think that it would achieve great things for women in our city. As many of you know, I experienced 2 miscarriages before having a successful pregnancy and recently having my beautiful baby girl, Ariana, who's now 4 months old. At the time that happened, I was so unprepared for it happening, and I just felt really sad and lonely and confused, and yeah, found it hard to process my emotions. But because I had family and friends in my own networks that had experienced it too, they were very open with me and supported me and offered guidance and advice, and they helped me heal basically physically and mentally from that experience. There are lots of places in the UK where the Women's Health Hub model is working well. In particular in Liverpool City, Council has worked with the local NHS to set up a network of health hubs and GP surgeries. This has created a seamless service by setting up a network of women's health hubs across the city's 10 primary care networks. The health hubs offer a range of services from long-acting reversible contraceptives through to cervical screening, psychosexual services and treatment for menopause and heavy periods. So a real variety of services. This has helped to increase services and support within that local area, and I think it could do the same in Portsmouth as well, which is why I think it's really exciting as a prospect.
I think it's really difficult and it would be fantastic to have more female councillors, but it is really quite a difficult thing to put yourself forward to. So even speaking in the chamber in front of people, it's really nerve-wracking sometimes. Sometimes you want to speak and then you kind of wimp out of it because you don't want to say the wrong thing or what have you, but it would be fantastic. But there are so many individual factors as to why maybe female, we don't have as many female councillors, or people don't put themselves forward, because it can be quite a not so pleasant environment as well, being in the world of politics, although we're all trying to do the better for the world of good. I'm also kind of hormonally challenged, so I didn't attend last month's full council because I've got stage 4 endometriosis, which I've had since 2014, and had 2 laparoscopies. And I can only echo from the deputation earlier that actually the support I've had from the endometriosis team at QA has been really great. I know it's been quite delayed, and unfortunately since having little wee Brent, I think it's kind of made things a bit more eruptive now in that area. So I would really, really love this health hub. I think it would be fantastic. I think I'm probably at the stage of early menopause as well, which is why I kind of, go through a few things on this particular item. But for me to sort of get that help, actually, it is quite difficult. And, to have somewhere to reach out to will be really encouraging.
So, just to catch up on the voices that you heard there. So that was Yinka Adeniran, Kirsty Miller, Leonie Oliver, Mary Vallely, Charlotte Gerarda, and Hannah Bren. To be honest with you, even though that was quite a long clip, it doesn't really kind of do justice to the things that they were sharing. And it's one of the reasons why we'd love to actually do an episode with the women's group of councillors that Leonie mentioned there. But ironically, one of the other things that they mentioned is the difficulty of trying to schedule those things because of things coming up and being relied on as the primary caregiver or the childcare arrangements. Another part of Leonie's contribution was also listing the fantastic contributions of the 10 women that are on the council, and of course that we've got Penny Mordaunt as the MP for Portsmouth North. Donna Jones, obviously, until 2018 was the leader of the council, and is now the Hampshire IOW Police and Crime Commissioner. So there's lots to do, and I think it's just kind of quite dismal to hear that in the 21st century, not only are women not represented properly on our democratic engagement, but also from a medical perspective, they're still struggling to get access to healthcare that's relevant to them and to actually be heard and understood by their medical practitioners. So the deputations from Steph Richards from endometriosis South Coast, which affects 1 in 10 women, and Sue Mullins, who was also contributing to a deputation to that and about the impact on diverse groups within that were not also reflected in some of those actually having even worse health outcomes or getting even worse levels of support than the average for women, which is still awful compared to the medical advice or help that seems to be readily available for men. So yeah, I kind of almost feel like it's a shame that this kind of needs bringing up, but the fact that you have to set up a women's health hub because they're not getting the health care that they need seems to be a very pressing issue that everybody could agree needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the deputation, many very personal stories kind of shared openly there and shared quite bravely. I think, you know, there's a lot to unpack. We could probably do a whole show just on that deputation alone, because, you know, the numbers speak for themselves, don't they? It's 42 councillors. You know, you would expect, if you look at the population demographic, there to be probably 22 female councillors and 20 male councillors, and it's 10:32. So there's less than half of the representation there should be. You know, so it is an issue. And I think there was an acknowledgement from, you know, one of the councillors that all parties have tried. You know, but there is an element of, and we've touched on it in this podcast before, you know, it isn't a salaried position. You know, there's a little bit of expenses, but it's almost something that you get to fit in your quote unquote spare time. And if you are the principal caregiver to the family, your spare time often goes somewhere else. So, you know, I think it's a problem that can be widely acknowledged. I think the Women's Health Hub is, you know, it's not something I'm going to pretend to speak to as a middle-aged man, other than it's very clear that with so many of the health services, that there isn't an integrated approach, and, you know, trying to get the help that you need is complex, and it is, you know, challenging. And I think, you know, if there's a solution that's been found that works, then it's definitely something that needs to be looked at.
The amendment from Valerie and Mella was subsumed, and the motion was carried. So
so was there an action within that to look at the provision of women's health hubs? Because that seemed to be the sort of main thrust by the end of the motion.
Yeah, it speaks to delivering a diversity inclusion strategy within the next 6 months, so that a greater awareness of gender equality is embedded across the council. Talks about updating staff training, supporting women and their families to get access to the benefits that they're entitled to, and exploring initiatives that aim to address the health inequalities for women, allowing them to remain or return to economic activity and improve the quality of life, and to continue to prioritise funding services that support families, children, and caregivers, including the establishment of a health hub in Portsmouth. So it does call for that. Obviously, we know the other conversations about where things are in the budget, but it kind of, you know, something's kind of deeply wrong that you have to fight that hard to find health support for 50% of the population. So that was that one passed, and I don't think anybody was surprised by that. The next one was a bit of a quicker motion. Was about an end to pointless paper usage from Councillor Raymond Dent and George Madgwick, talking about the 10,000 sheets of paper across roles that councillors get every year, and the sheer bricks of paperwork that people get. There's a bit of a conversation about using e-ink tablets. I think Russell Simpson from Hilsey mentioned about Remarkable, but other tablets are available. For example, there's ones by Onyx that actually are not a proprietary platforms, so probably easier to integrate with council systems. So yeah, why the hell are you killing so many trees every year just to send us stuff that is only actually useful for a week and then we chuck away or we recycle?
Yeah. Well,
So,
I mean, absolute madness, isn't it? I mean, and again, you know, as somebody who can't work with paper, you know, the hooray for the fact that the PDF has been invented, and you know, send me the document as an electronic attachment and my screen reader can read it, or you can read it on screen, or you know, it is a. I mean, I found this one faintly incredulous that we're still sending out agendas and papers and everything by, well, in paper. You know, again, we keep talking about a climate crisis and planting trees and greening the city up, whilst, you know, is my maths right? If it's 10,000 per councillor, then 4.2 million sheets of paper died last year in support of our council.
I think it's basically a tree per councillor. So there was a conversation about Mary Valley pointed out that some people with dyslexia, for example, find it much easier to use the printed word. So it's about having a system where there's choice rather than an assumption of paper, but there's still being a choice for those that need to have it. Simon Bosher talked about, because he needs to get his delivered to him because he's in the north of the city, so he needs to come and collect them. But he also pointed out that there was a whole whole inches worth of paperwork that he got sent twice. Because he got them once as a member of a particular committee, and then he got sent them again. So there's inefficiencies there. There's a logical bringing choice into that. But it does seem a bit of a no-brainer that anyone with any sense or in any modern organisation wouldn't be doing those sorts of things. So again, unsurprisingly, there was an amendment from councillors Weems and Bosher, which was subsumed, which, to be honest with you, just tidied out the language a bit, and I think gave the motion a bit more of structure, and the whole thing just passed. It's just a no-brainer. The next one was about Guildhall Trust Theatre operations outside of Portsmouth, from Atkins and Bosher. Concern there that the Guildhall Trust, which is funded by council taxpayers, actually getting involved with helping to run a theatre in Hastings. In Hastings.
Yep.
Yes. So they had a battle on their hands. With Steve Pitt wasn't in the chamber this week. He'd given his apologies because he's currently suffering from a really bad back, so wouldn't be able to be seated long enough to be able to go through the council. But there was it seemed, because Susie Horton gave some explanations on behalf of Councillor Steve Pitt, saying that basically there isn't a financial commitment, there isn't a redistribution of resources from the Guildhall. So if I'm honest, it kind of had the feeling that couldn't this have been a member's question instead of actually a motion, but the motion was lost. So the next one was talking about addressing failures in major project delivery.
Cool.
So this from Matthew Atkins and from Simon Bosher. Again, I won't play clips on this one, but it kind of lists, Matthew lists a load of projects that basically never came to anything, or a load of projects that, encountered loads of difficulties, or projects that one particular party claimed were their work, whereas another party was claiming that they'd actually started the ball rolling on that one, and then there was a bit of to and fro. But sometimes you start things and we start things, and that's just how that works. The motion didn't pass.
Funnily enough, we call upon this council to be very clear that they are rubbish.
Well, but this was the strange thing, is that in a strange way, I think the way it was presented kind of got in the way of its own intention. And Councillor George Madgwick spoke to this, saying that actually other councillors had said that they pretty much agree with the idea of the motion, which is saying the Major Projects Board hasn't met for quite a while and isn't reporting. There should be more scrutiny and transparency about what's happening with major projects. And the administration's response was, but the items that are brought up in that meeting and the projects that are being reviewed are actually not suggested by the administration; they're suggested by the group leaders. And the door's there to actually have meetings. So this usual thing of, you don't work with us, but we're saying you can work with us, but you don't. And it's that thing. But fundamentally, the thing of, could we have a bit more of an idea of what's happening with our major projects, please, so that we don't end up getting left with expensive mistakes all over.
Yeah. Does this talk to, though, Simon, the whole, there's another committee that needs to meet that we're calling on our councillors again to, well, it hasn't met very often. Well, is that about, it does always worry me, the fact that, a projects review board for a £20 million capital project should be meeting regularly, and we shouldn't need to be creating another meeting to review whatever that capital review board is telling the sponsors. And I'm using the sort of Bransbury Park.
Oh, have you just frozen? Have I just lost you? Ian, have I just lost you? It looks like I've just lost you. Okay, so yeah, I think just while we wait for Ian to come back, it seems, I think fundamentally the question of, could we have a better handle of what's going on in projects, seems like a logical thing, but that, I think in any other sort of environment, that would be a high level and fairly regular conversation. But the logic of it seems a pretty sound. Yeah, so we'll see on that one. So moving on to that, seems like Ian's dropped off the call. So I'm going to carry on until Ian can come back in. But the next one was about the crisis in local authority funding, and this one was quite a meaty one. It had actually 3 amendments proposed for it, and I've got a clip here to play on this one. So let's play that one, and hopefully in the meantime, Ian will rejoin us.
I wanted to really set out that this is a real problem, and I'm just going to quote 2 or 3 things to start with. In December, the LGA carried out a survey of local authorities, and 1 in 5 council leaders and chief executives think it is fairly likely that their chief finance officer will need to issue a Section 114 report this year or next due to the lack of funding for key services and keeping them running. In November of last year, the County Council's network, this is County Council treasurers and chief executives, carried out a survey of 41 local county authorities and unitaries. And according to their analysis, 1 in 10 of well-managed councils are unsure or not confident that they can balance their budgets this year. That goes up to 4 in 10 in 2024 and 6 in 10 in 2025. So this is them looking forward to what they may face. And it also means that the financial issues that are beginning to affect local authorities are not just affecting those that have done things maybe unwisely. We've seen within our own area in Hampshire, the Hampshire County Council is facing a really serious situation. And Southampton similarly have faced a really difficult situation. But it's not the case that you could say those councils have been particularly badly managed.
Message, Simon.
In Portsmouth, whilst we're not anywhere near the idea of getting a Section 144, we still had a budget which took £2 million out of our services in 24-25, and we face a further projected deficit of £3 million over the next 3 financial years, which will have to be met. And I'm not sure where we're going to find that. This is going to be a real struggle. The immediate causes of this are fairly clear, and we've had in recent years increasing demands for services, particularly in adult social care and children's services, and the cost of temporary accommodation and homelessness has been a real problem. Plus, we've had general inflation, and we've had that affecting both supplies and employment, we've had energy costs and rising interest rates, and we know some of the political context for where that has happened. So sometimes the word crisis is overused, but I think in this case, I think the scale and extent of the problems facing local government actually justify the use of that term.
Turning off streetlights, cutting spending on roads, vital bus services gone, homelessness spending slashed, and that's just Conservative Hampshire. Councils of all colours have been let down. The failure of national politicians to fix adult social care and the upcoming crisis in the dedicated schools grant that threatens to bankrupt authorities such as Lib Dem-led Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are just the worst examples of that failure of national politicians to deal with the crisis in local authority funding. Now, my first concern with what Councillor Heaney has said is it lacks a bit of context. When leader Councillor Vernon Jackson told us more than once how for local government austerity did not start in 2010. It goes back all the way to the days of Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So there's nothing wrong with the motion, but I think that context is required in that we've had 20, 30, 40 years of austerity and we have finally reached crunch point as a council. I particularly want to praise reforming council tax. A compromise after the hated poll tax brought down Margaret Thatcher. National politicians have been, frankly, of all colours, have been too scared to change it for fear of upsetting voters. However, basing council income on 1991 house prices is daft. Personally, I would replace council tax with local income tax and business rates with site value rating linked to turnover so that we can encourage and develop small businesses. Others will have different views, but accepting that the problem exists, as Councillor Heaney and Councillor Fielding's motion does, means that we can start a constructive discussion going forward. Now, I sort of understand National Labour's unbelievably cautious approach, symbolises in its junking of the admirable in many ways £28 billion Green New Deal, and it makes it reluctant to commit to anything, even if, as with the proposals that Councillor Heaney and Councillor Fielding have outlined, it would change things for good, and we believe would save money in the longer term. Strangely, one of the few things Labour has committed to, which is the reform of business rates, is not in this motion, my Lord Mayor, and that's a shame. Because local government, like social care, needs cross-party commitment over a long period of time if we are to see real results.
This is going to horrify and shock you, Councillor Sanders. I actually agree with pretty much everything you just said. And it may also surprise people to hear when they read this, but the amendment I put out is my attempt to be reasonable and essentially capture the same things that you were just saying. To start with, I don't deny the headline problem. Local government funding falls short of the funding that local government needs. And the main way that it falls short, in my opinion, is central government funding for our statutory obligations, particularly adult and children's social care. And we have to divert an increasing amount of our controllable spend to shortfall in these services. Our obligations in them only seem to increase year on year. And in fact, if we look at the most recent budget we passed, all of the shortfall really that we were experiencing arose out of those, or almost all of it out of those two portfolios. I don't want the motion to read as if it absolves us as councillors of fiscal responsibility, and I felt a little bit that it does. I fully accept that we all want to lobby government for more local authority funding, but the challenges that are faced by local councils are the responsibility of those local councils, and not going bankrupt is the responsibility of a local council.
The whole notice of motion, and I think that's also been addressed with what the Liberal Democrats have said and what Councillor Atkins has said, is that national governments of whatever particular colour put pressure on the local taxpayer to pay through council tax to support local services. We do have a crisis here, and essentially what he's looking to put in there is correct. All governments are complicit in what we're actually doing in here, and I think Councillor Heaney actually needs to recognise that fact, and hopefully, should there be a change of government, and I suspect there probably won't, we live in hope. Well, you never know. Penny Mordaunt might be the new Prime Minister shortly, but you know, we know that may well happen. The incoming Labour government, if that is the case, will actually do something about local government funding, but the noises I'm hearing coming out of Rachel Reeves suggest not.
Okay, so local government funding.
Well, apologies there, Simon. Our internet fell over. I fixed it. I'm back. I came back twice, but now hopefully there's just one version of me.
There is just one version of you, although you are slightly darker, but let's leave it as it is. Let's not play.
Oh, that's the darkness fading there. Well, I caught most of that, and I think, it's one of those. It's a bit of an imponderable, isn't it? Which is that, costs are going up. We want to pay the living wage. We want people to earn decent salaries. We want to provide good quality adult social care. We highlighted the issue earlier on women's health hubs and dentistry, and we seem to be getting quite a lot of universal agreement on where the problems lie, and all of them, with all due respect, seem to want more money. And the circle that doesn't, for me, appear to be able to be squared is, where's that money going to come from? And look, we will save a few quid if we stop printing 4 million sheets of A4 every year, but I'm not sure that's going to close the gap, is it?
Yeah, I don't think as a cost saving project that's going to get the magnitude that you're after. But there's wider things, aren't there? But I think it's interesting to, aside from, I think everybody wanting to actually set their own narrative as to when the cuts to local government funding began, and who started it, and the fact that they've gone on so long and been so deep. So there's a bit of political point scoring or record straightening, depending on how you look at it, in regards to that. Interesting points from Darren Sanders there about actually, the council tax is pretty much designed and set up wrong and hasn't been reviewed, and should be. Some not really any unexpected interventions from Graham Heaney, Darren Sanders, Matthew Atkins, and Simon Bosher. There were others contributing to it, but just in the clip, that's who we had. Interesting to hear Matthew Atkins saying that he pretty much agreed with everything that Darren had said. I think this is just the fertile ground that that the locals and the whenever the hell it will come general election will be fought on, will be that sort of question. But the truth is, and I think it was part of the issue that Councillor Atkins put his finger on, was that the biggest issues are actually the mandatory services where the funding isn't coming completely from central government. Mandatory services, then should the council, because it just reduces the amount of discretionary spend that the council has, and then therefore means that they actually have less and less control over which bit of the pie they have actually any choice over. Not absolving them, of course, of the responsibility to make sure that they are operating to a deficit, and that they are being responsible with funding, which kind of speaks, I think, it's a bit of a joined up thinking with his motion about the projects thing, and about how there can be waste of money there. So I think there was an interesting debate on that one. A bit of politics, a bit of point scoring, but the truth is the money isn't there. And yes, your own question is right. Is if the money isn't there, where is the money going to come from?
Well, and
local government is doing the Oliver of, please sir, can I have some more?
Well, and that is the case, isn't it? At the end of the day, the credit card bill for COVID and all of the subsidy to cover the fuel expansion for the war in Ukraine is £500 billion. It is £500 billion that the government has borrowed. And the interesting piece on that is that, and you can point, and people will, and say, yeah, but what about the PPE scandals? And it's right that they should call that out. But actually, the vast majority of that money went on the furlough scheme that everybody thought was a good thing, and went on subsidising people's fuel bills, which people seem to think was a good thing. And that money is gone. It is spent. It's never coming back. And I think this is where I think the political landscape is very difficult at the moment, because people are searching for this election to be, some parties telling them that it's going to, things can only get better.
Well, but I think the interesting thing is that of the two larger parties, Labour certainly aren't saying that they can fix everything.
No, they're not.
Being very careful to say that actually everything's in such a state it's going to take 5-10 years. This is a decades long project to turn this around. So I think that's the honest truth. And people that might be saying, oh, it's easy to just slash loads of taxation or to come up with really crazy things. We're going to get rid of national insurance, but what about the £40 billion hole that would make in the exchequer? How we all know what happened the last time someone suggested loads of unfunded tax cuts.
And I think you're absolutely spot on. And again, the Conservative message at the moment is look, inflation's coming down, things are getting better. All the tide's starting to turn. Stick with us. And I think I guess Reform are offering us the opportunity to go back to 1978 when everything was wonderful and things were proper. I think this is, I think this election is going to be a fascinating one, because I think again, people come up with these with the slogans, and I'm not convinced that that we've got stick with us and well, a change is as good as a rest as the two main party slogans. So, yeah, interesting debate.
As the saying goes, there are only two types of election campaign. It's time for change, or it's too risky to change now.
Yeah.
And that's essentially the arguments that both of the two larger parties will be making. The next, that one had 3 amendments submitted for it. The one from Councillors Sanders and Hunt was subsumed. The ones from Bosher and Gosling fell. And the one from Atkins and Weems fell. And then the motion with the subsumed Lib Dem amendment was carried.
Interesting, isn't it, that the chamber has, again, we're starting to see that every motion or amendment brought forward by the Conservatives falls at this point. I think the balance of power, and we'll pick that up as we head into our review of the arrangements to come. But it is it is a very interesting dynamic in there at the moment.
It's also interesting that there are essentially 2 flavours of Conservative amendments.
Yes,
when they're being submitted. So, but that's not entirely separate, because obviously Conservative Group leader Simon Bosher and Matthew Atkins were proposer or seconder on a couple of motions. So it's not criticism. It's just that there's a clear dividing line, I think, on economic policy there, and Matthew Atkins has been very good at laying out what that difference is and where his thoughts on it lie. The next motion I won't really speak to was the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Integrated Care Board, basically just doing more stuff about integrating and finding the best ways of working, and calling on the council group on the cabinet to be doing more of that to make that more effective, because it works better in other places and it's not so great where we are. The last motion was about safer recruiting council. That one, I know you were particularly interested in that one.
Yes, time has kind of has got away from us a little bit, but is there a clip for it?
Yeah, I can play the clip on it.
Is it a long clip?
But the motion itself is to set our city as a safer recruiting council to protect the community and reassure the public that all members obtain a DBS check while in current office or when they become newly elected. Due to the varied roles and responsibilities of being a councillor, there's regular contact between elected members and the public, including one-to-one contact in private spaces. Now, after research in other councils, this has been discussed around the beginning of this year, at the end of last year, and a letter was sent to leaders of unitary and upper-tier authorities in England and the chair of the Local Government Association. A quote from the letter from MP Simon Hoare in January said, "Government strongly supports the recommendation and I urge for enhanced DBS check to be adopted as best practice for all councillors being considered for an appointment to any committee which discharges educational social service functions. I feel strongly that adopting as best practice enhanced DBS checks for all councillors serving on committees with responsibilities for children's services or services for vulnerable adults is important to ensure public confidence in political representatives." Now,
slight issue that is currently happening with DBS checks is that they're being significantly delayed. But also, whilst we're talking about elected members, you might want to broaden that to candidates as well.
I mean, this has got a financial issue as well, because these are going to have to be paid for. Also, as a practical issue, if you look and you hear and you see in the newspapers, because you were talking about, most of your speech was about enhanced, Lord Mayor, the speech was mainly about enhanced DBS checks, but the notice of motion is about DBS checks that are different. The enhanced one take a long time, or can take a very long time. You know, we could, if all councillors here had to go and have a DBS check or enhanced DBS check, in the first month or two of the council, nobody would be able to do any work. So I think, although we're going to vote for it tonight, it has to be looked at much more properly than on the hoof tonight to decide what it actually means. Because if we have a 60-day delay from the date that councillors get elected to actually doing any business, the council's going to be in big trouble for the rest of the year.
As I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to councillors that are sitting in committees, as it says there in note 1, with regards to children and sitting on children's services, so that would obviously be Councillor Horton, do we automatically, as a city councillor, put them through an enhanced DBS check, or are we in a situation at the moment where, and I'm picking on Councillor Horton because she's in that role, that we have a councillor making decisions and being in close proximity with potentially vulnerable children that does not have a DBS check. So therefore it would be down to the onus of our political parties then to make sure that the candidates they're putting forward are upstanding pillars of the local community. I don't think personally that is far enough. It's about a public perception, I think, of what they expect a councillor to be. I'm no different to anybody else, and I'm very, very careful, and perhaps it's not necessarily children and vulnerable and young vulnerable adults, but certainly in Drayton Farlington, we have a large majority of particularly elderly, vulnerable single women that require obviously councillor input. Now, as much as I can, and my ward colleagues do, we encourage them to come to our surgeries that we've been holding for donkey's years, and the majority of them do. But in certain circumstances, if they're housebound and whatever, it puts me in a very invidious situation if I'm not careful when I'm visiting them. Now, I fully grant that a piece of paper saying I'm a wonderful person isn't necessarily actually going to do that. But I think there could be a moral thing with regards to us. I'm not quite sure we get candidates to do it but certainly from a councillor point of view, whether we do it voluntarily off our own back, pay for it ourselves, because I think the cost is about 50 quid or something in that sort of order, but I think it demonstrates that we're prepared to put our head above the wall and say, yes, and to demonstrate I'm this. So
thank you. A point of information is that if you've been convicted and received a prison sentence or suspended sentence of 3 months or more in 5 years before election, you're unable to stand in the election. DBS check won't disqualify you from being a councillor. That's all there is to it, really. In the Liberal Democrats, we asked people this question. I don't know what you do in the Tories. Quite a few got through into Parliament. And but that's what we do. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
My Lord Mayor, members, why wouldn't we do this? It doesn't matter if there's a delay caused by others. If people have applied, as soon as they become councillors, then at least we are doing the right thing and can't be caught out.
So,
Interesting. Lots of misunderstanding and misinformation in there, Simon.
Yeah, I think there would. I think there was a bit of because so the people speaking there were moving the motion was Councillor Hannah Brent. Speaking was George Fielding, Lee Hunt, Simon Bosher, and then another intervention from Lee Hunt, and then Judith Smythe with the common sense of how can we not do this? It's the recommendation that Hannah Brent was referring to was asking for enhanced DBS background checks for people actually in positions where they're definitely responsible for people with vulnerability. So in those situations, what I didn't capture was the conversation that Simon Bosher had with the city solicitor, where there isn't actually it isn't something the council can legally require of a councillor and enforce. So on one hand, yes, it makes absolute common sense that public figures have these sorts of background checks, and in order to understand that they're to be fair, that they're right and proper people to be interacting with vulnerable members of the public, or especially if they're interacting with minors. So I think there's a common sense there to it.
But there isn't, Simon.
For it, I don't. If it's
So for me, there is an element of. So the fact is that an enhanced DBS check, which is what they were talking about, is only ever done at a point in time. So it says you haven't done anything terrible at the point that we looked, and if you look at that statement of, well, councillors couldn't do any work, and again, this would sit within a safeguarding framework, which is to effectively make sure that somebody in a position of power or influence, can't find them or can't manoeuvre themselves into a situation with a child or a vulnerable person and take advantage of them. So there is an element of, whilst it would be a good thing to do, to the point Simon Bosher spoke about there, once you have that certificate, there's a duty of care from our councillors, to try and not find themselves in positions where they are one-on-one with a potentially vulnerable person. And similarly, when somebody said, well, we couldn't work for 60 days, I'm afraid that's not true. There are activities that I think councillors should be discouraged from undertaking on a one-to-one basis, simply to safeguard themselves, be that from physical or from accusations that might follow. So I think it's a bigger issue, and I think the other thing to rest assured is that people within the council who are working with children or with vulnerable people, they all will have been through this. So this was about our councillors. I think it would be a good thing to do, simply because if there was somebody nefarious who was looking to implement, the fact that you have to go through an enhanced DBS would act potentially as a deterrent. It won't, no safeguarding process can guarantee that your malicious wrongdoer won't look to circumvent the situation. But I think it does speak to a bigger piece of work that perhaps is missing in terms of guidance on how councillors conduct themselves, and again that things such as ward surgeries, should they really be doing that as a lone individual without other folk in the room? I think that's probably the bigger issue that we're not going to have time to cover, but a sensible subject to be discussed.
Yeah, I mean personally, I mean the standard DBS check is £18 plus a £10 admin fee. The enhanced is
Yeah.
£38 plus a £10 admin fee. The admin fees are exclusive of VAT. But nonetheless, we're not talking about, I mean, to be really honest with you, I don't, I mean, I know that political parties prefer to spend monies on leaflets, but I don't understand why actually why don't they all just voluntarily say, do you know what, we're going to get all of our candidates a standard DBS check.
Yeah, and I guess that, you know, as you say, it's not mega money, but then if you look at the finances around political parties, if you were sending 14 candidates in each election, that's £700, isn't it? They're, you know, again, they are only as good as the time in which they're checked. So I guess if you're not elected, you know, is it 2 or 3 years before you do that check again? So yeah, I think there is an ongoing cost to it, but and as I sort of highlighted there, it whilst it gives some protection, it isn't all of the answer. So
No.
In the interest of time, Simon, I think, have we covered all the motions?
And that was all the motions. We'll leave off talking about the questions to members in the interest of time. But yeah, I'll put some links to if people want to go and watch the unedited debates in full. I'll put those onto our website tomorrow or later this evening. Yeah, you know, that was the last one. We didn't kind of really have time to talk about the round off that was the lovely round off that was given with Susie Horton and Kirsty Meller and Simon Fisher and others, basically giving their praise and thanks to Tom and Nikki Coles for their year as Lord and Lady Mayoress. A year goes past really, really quickly.
Certainly does, and I guess that's the thing where, you know, it's never really, we talk about it being a year, it's not quite, is it? Because, you know, the breaks come on at the end of March. You know, we then have sort of April and May off for all the fun of the fair of elections, and to that end we will be taking next Sunday off as it's Easter Sunday, so we will be obviously feasting on eggs and some other kind of nourishing comestible. But we will be hopefully back the week after, where we will begin our own frenzied run into the election with the hustings if any candidates are brave enough to step forward, which we hope they are. Otherwise, it could be a bit of a skinny April for us. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. And yes, if you are a candidate in the local elections, second in Portsmouth, and you want to take part in ward hustings, we'll do hustings for any ward where we can get at least 2 candidates in that ward to agree on a date. Please do contact us, either message us on Facebook or email us at studio@pppodcast.uk. That's studio@pppodcast.uk. You can find a link on our website, which is pppodcast.uk. Yes, we will see you in 2 weeks' time, and this is when all the fun begins. See you then.